Hi everybody. Hopefully you can all see me and hear me. It's great to be able to see so many of your faces. Any of the others of you who don't have video on, if you are able to, even if it's just for a few minutes so that we can see your face, that would be really helpful. Thank you everybody for joining. I appreciate it. Brilliant. Look at you all. Wonderful. Hopefully people from all over the world that we've got here connecting, so it's really great to have you all here together. My name's Sian and I'm the Network Development and Resilience Project Manager here at the Consortium for Street Children, and I'm leading on the Building with Bamboo project, of which this is our first shared learning panel. So what we will be doing in this session, as you know, is to share some of the initial learning that's coming out of our project. That will be done by myself, by Ruth Edmonds, who you can see on your screen right now in the blue t-shirt, and also by Alfred Ochaya, who you can also see. And we also have with us Martha Espinoza. If you'd like to wave, Martha. Martha and Alfred are two of our 3 resilience champions. So they are 2 of the people who are leading on our Building with Bamboo project from their local sites. So before we get on with the presentation, I'll do a bit of housekeeping. First of all, there's going to be a presentation by myself and Ruth, and then a presentation by Alfred, after which we'll have time for questions and discussion. So any questions you have to ask us, if you have a question, please either raise your hand like this, or you can use the hand raise function on the right hand side if you click on over there, or you can also use the chat function to post questions there if you find that easier, or if you have comments as people are talking. I hold the power to mute and unmute, I'm afraid. So if you do want to speak, then make yourself known. If you've got a camera, by waving, or if you haven't, by making a comment in the right-hand side chat column. And I will unmute you so that you can then be heard. Okay, so before we get started, I will just check. Okay, no, I think we're ready to go. I'm just going to check that Ellie is okay. Ellie, who we have, who you can see, give a wave, Ellie. Ellie's our monitoring, evaluation and learning officer. And she's going to be coordinating the PowerPoint slides. So I'm just checking that she's all ready to go. And also who we have here is Mildred. Are you in, Mildred? Yep, so Mildred, who you've probably all been communicating with about registering for the webinar, is our fantastic network intern who's doing a lot of support work on the Building with Bamboo project. So that's the team. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. I'm going to hand over to Ellie to start the PowerPoint slides now, and then we'll get on with things. So Ellie, have you given me power to share, to control it? Yes, great. Here we go. I think this is hopefully this is going to work. Is it? Yes. So I think most of you are familiar with CSC, but I wanted to give you a very brief introduction. So we're a global network that raises street children's voices, advocates for their rights, and works to improve their opportunities for life. We've got just over 100 members, which is the biggest we've ever been. Those members are mostly organisations, NGOs who work with or for street-connected children, and also researchers. We have a research expert forum of 20 leading academics working on issues related to street-connected children. And my role is very much on the network development side, so growing and strengthening our network, and also project managing projects like Building with Bamboo, which is the main focus of my work, which are collaborations between network members and other organisations. Okay. So Building with Bamboo, as hopefully you all know, is about resilience. It's about trying to find out what a resilience-based approach to working with street-connected children exposed to sexual abuse and exploitation might look like, and to learn some more about how that can be implemented. It's collaboration with the Oak Foundation as part of their ongoing Bamboo initiative on resilience, led by CSC, and we're working very closely with Keep Your Shoes Dirty, which is Ruth Edmonds, who's on your screen, who are a social development research consultancy, and also with these 3 organisations who are part of the CSC network. So we have CWISH, who are working in Kathmandu, Nepal. We have Salve International working in Jinja, Uganda, and we have Hokoni, Ecuador, who are working in Guayaquil in Ecuador. So just to quickly let you know what I'll be covering in this presentation, I'm going to do a short piece on framing resilience for work with street-connected children. Some issues that have come up through our work so far on resilience, through some of the kind of the thinking and talking and research we've been doing around the issue kind of in the lead up to and during this project. We'll be telling you a little bit about the approach that we're taking to develop resilience-based approaches, and that point Ruth will come in with some slides about the learning framework that she's helped develop with the Resilience Champions. Again, how we're learning about them, a bit about the structure of the learning project, and then some of the emerging insights so far. So what are the things which we're starting to learn as we go forward? And then finally, at the end, I'll give you a bit of information about what we're doing next. And that's before I hand over to Alfred, who will give you a much more hands-on presentation about his experiences as Resilience Champion at Salve. So just very briefly, I know this is a lot of text, but I wanted to provide some framing of our approach to resilience. It's a concept which is much talked about, much debated. There are different interpretations and understandings of resilience, depending on cultural settings and depending on the angle from which people are coming to. So a practitioner might think of resilience in a very different way to a researcher, or to a psychologist or a medical professional, compared to a social scientist, for example. So this is just a very brief overview that captures what angle and approach we're taking in order to inform this project. And this information, along with a more detailed unpacking of our understanding of resilience, which is drawn from the Oak Foundation's Bamboo initiative, as well as our learning so far, it can be found in more detail on the learning platform, buildingwithbamboo.org, in the blog section, I believe, and also in the resources section. So street connections. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about specifically about children with street connections and how and their relationship with resilience, and what we can learn by looking at street connections through a resilience lens. Street connected children have a unique set of challenges which they face on a daily basis, which challenge their ability to be resilient, but they also do have a unique set of opportunities available to them. The connections that a child makes on the street can be a source of strength, they can be a source of family, and they can be a source of resources as well. But spending time in public spaces also exposes them to a set of challenges, not just the ongoing entrenched poverty, stigma, discrimination, and hunger that they face on a daily basis, but also exposure to abuse, exploitation, and violence in different forms. So I think it's important when we're talking about street-connected children that we don't shy away from the resilience factors in a street-connected child's life that might to us appear risky, that might go against our ideas of childhood and how a child should behave, resilience factors which are inconsistent, and resilience capacity that might fluctuate not only over time but in relation to different challenges that they may face and different situations a child might find them in as a result of their connection to the street. I think seeing a street-connected child through a resilience lens doesn't just challenge our ideas of childhood and of street connections, but it also challenges our ideas and assumptions that we make about resilience. So a child who lives in circumstances of constant adversity, such as those who rely on the street for their survival, may well have a different set of priorities for their well-being and different ways of coping with one-off traumatic events which occur in the context of this wider adversity. And that's something which is kind of been coming up again and again in our project so far. I think one of the things which is extremely important, and this came from the Oak Foundation's Bamboo Research Initiative, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, is to remember that resilience is not a way to cure or erase the entrenched material inequalities and systematic injustices that have led children to take to the streets for their survival. It's not a magic bullet, if you like. Resilience-based approaches can't use resilience as a mean to dismiss or play down the huge and very real challenges that street-connected children face, and certainly not to distract from the responsibility of authorities and duty bearers to keep street-connected children safe and maintain their well-being. So street connections, what we have learned about street connections and resilience is that actually a resilience lens can really change the way that that street-connected children think about themselves and about their circumstances, and the way that other people think about street-connected children. Now, this came out from the bamboo research that was undertaken by Oak Foundation. So street resilience can help change a street-connected child's perception of their own potential. It can change the perception that staff who work for NGOs working with street-connected children have about the potential of the children they support. And also wider community members can have their perception changed by reframing street-connected children through the lens of resilience. Similarly, resilience may be able to influence how a person copes with or perceives their circumstances. It might be able to stimulate the confidence to ask questions and imagine new possibilities. This was something, again, taken from the Bamboo Synthesis Report, which is available on our website. And I think it's important to mention that specifically in relation to street connections, resilience and promoting resilience and a resilience-based approach isn't about leaving the street. It's about how children cope with the shocks and stresses that they face while they're on the street, as well as how they cope with the shocks and stresses they experience in the home that may have driven them to the street or may keep them there. So that's a bit about resilience and street connections. I hope that's been a good scene setting in terms of the approach that CSC has been taking to this project. So I'll just go on to the next slide and give you a very brief rundown of what exactly this bamboo thing is all about. I'm often asked why this project is called Building with Bamboo, and I'm sure that Jane, who is in the virtual room, similarly had a lot of questions when she was working on the Bamboo Phase 1 project at Oak Foundation. Simply, bamboo is a material which bends but doesn't break, and not only that, so not only does it bounce back, but it also continues to grow, and that's kind of the metaphor that's been driving through this initiative right from the beginning. So the Bamboo project was a multi-country study that was undertaken in Bulgaria, Ethiopia and Nepal. So in Bulgaria, it was undertaken with children who were either in or leavers from care settings. In Ethiopia, it was with street-connected children who worked on the street, and many of whom were involved in child sexual exploitation. And finally, in Nepal, the research was undertaken with street-connected child domestic workers. And the findings from this report, from this research, was brought together by the International Steering Committee for the project into a synthesis report that tried to make sense and say, okay, so what have we learned about resilience in relation to children who are exposed to sexual abuse and exploitation? Now, what they came up with from that was a set of operational implications, which is the starting point for Building with Bamboo, if you like. This was what CSC took hold of and had to move forward with in trying to work out how we can take the findings from that research forward into the next stage. And I'll just give a very quick rundown of them. So there were 5 operational implications, which were the importance of listening and learning. So listening to children and learning from them, understanding that they have ideas about what has and hasn't worked for them so far, understanding that intervention should be informed by children's own experiences, that intervention should be participative, and that a holistic approach should be taken to children in their lives. The importance of recognising children are not passive victims, that they have developed their own strategies as actors in their lives, that they are capable of seeking support, and that they have ideas to contribute and are capable of being leaders in their own life path. The importance of non-formal actors, which I know Alfred is going to be talking about in more detail a little bit later. So the role that people who have non-formal roles in children's lives can play in supporting the resilience of children. People who are not NGO staff, are not authorities and not family members, but other people in the community. The importance of context, which comes down to that importance of recognising the wider context of poverty, stigma, discrimination and violence that children often live within. And finally, the importance of acknowledging and accommodating diversity and differences, acknowledging that that a one-size-fits-all approach to resilience isn't going to work, that sometimes the least visible children are the most vulnerable and the most marginalised, and how can they be reached? So that was our starting point. So building with bamboo then is about taking that to the next level. So we have this rich research which gave us a lot of information about how children perceive their own resilience and their own resilience factors. At this stage in building with bamboo then, we want to learn not just about children and resilience, as the research explored, but we want to expand our learning to practitioners and organisations as well. This means looking at staff and organisations, their relationship with the children they work with, their perception of the potential of the children they work with, and the circumstances they live within, as I mentioned on an earlier slide. And we want to find out how we might develop approaches to working with street-connected children which are informed by resilience and will help to promote and strengthen resilience in children and the resilience factors in their lives, to capitalise upon those which are already there, and to identify where there's a potential to build new resilience factors. And then finally, of course, how these might improve outcomes for children who are exposed to sexual abuse and exploitation. So the way we're doing this, as some of you may well know already, if you're already signed up to our learning platform, we have 3 organisations, Hukoni in Ecuador, who's Martha, who's on the call here, Salve in Uganda, and Seawish in Nepal. And at each site we have a resilience champion. So we have Martha, Alfred and Krishna. The reason that we're taking this approach is in order to have one individual who has a good chunk of their time and capacity freed up to focus on this, someone who's in a position within the organisation to be able to well disseminate learning and to kind of manage across and manage up in terms of bringing about change in their organisation or adaptations that might better promote resilience. So I'm going to take a pause now and take a breath and a mouthful of my coffee before I get on with the next slide, as I've been talking a lot. I'm sorry about that. It's what I do. So what did we actually do? Well, these 3 organisations began by looking at those operational implications from the bamboo research, by drawing on their own knowledge and expertise from the individual resilience champions, their colleagues and the children that they work with, and coming up with initial pilot approaches and programmatic interventions or adaptations that they think are resilience-based or based on what they know might help to promote resilience, and find out whether those bamboo research implications are accurate or not. And so that's what we did. And I'm going to hand over to Ruth now, who will be able to take us to the next stage about exactly how we're going about learning about those approaches, adapting them, and most importantly, innovating to move forward. Ruth?
Will it work?
You're unmuted. You're unmuted. Okay. I hereby grant you permission to speak.
Thank you very much, Sian. And I have control of the slides as well, don't I, Sian? So good. So before we just move on to the next slide, I'll follow on from Sian and tell you just a little bit about the approach that we've been taking to understand more about these resilience-based approaches that have been implemented and are being, and also ways in which they're promoting resilience with children and then building hopefully better well-being. That's the sort of chain, I suppose, that we're trying to understand. So just to tell you a bit about this approach first. We've developed basically a bespoke learning and innovation approach, which draws on a few different sort of theories and approaches itself. These include things like developmental evaluation, ethnographic principles, so the idea of listening to people, starting with their own perceptions about their lives and participating in their lives to understand them. Process-based evaluation as opposed to impact-focused evaluation, and participative approaches, as Sian has mentioned before. And the general approach we've been taking is reflecting our need to continue learning. So to be iterative, to continue adapting resilience-based approaches as we learn, to try new things out. And so essentially the approach basically encourages, supports and tracks a trajectory of organisational innovation and decision-making in relation to resilience-based approaches by helping the champions and the organisations think through, adapt and test their programme activities and ideas. And this approach was chosen because it's suited to unstable, uncertain and chaotic settings, so populations which fluctuate and change and that are influenced by multiple factors. And it's an approach that's good at looking at complexity as well, and responding to that complexity with sort of innovation as we go. And organisations, I think we'll all know, organisations working with street-connected children need to be flexible and agile, and they need to be quite adaptable and responsive. So, for example, a sudden increase in police roundups of street-connected children might demand a different kind of service. And so we considered that this sort of very fluid approach would be useful here. Now, I just want to move on. How do I move on to the next slide, Sean? Could you move me on?
Should be the arrow key.
Mm-hmm.
Your arrow keys, right and left arrow keys.
Yeah.
Try that. There we go.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, it was beeping at me and wasn't letting me push. Okay, so I'll now just explain what this what we did to prepare for this kind of learning and innovation approach, and how we kind of put this into practice. And then I'll tell you a little bit about in a moment, a little bit about what those cycles of learning and innovation look like. First, we did narratives of resilience and well-being. These were so we could situate these concepts in the local social cultural settings in which we were working. Now, resilience, of course, is an external concept, and in order to apply that sort of operationally within the resilience-based approaches, we had to understand what its local constituents were. In other words, how would we recognise it if it showed up? In response to, it showed up with children in response to these activities that we were conducting through champions. So we needed to know what the kind of local social and cultural components of resilience in these particular places look like. We then use these local narratives to develop 3 distinct learning frameworks, one for each location, that could guide our learning around these local components of resilience and well-being in each place. And then we designed some learning activities that could be used with children, staff and community members to generate learning about how the partner approaches are promoting resilience and leading to better well-being amongst street-connected children. And then finally, we trained resilience champions in these activities in order to lead them and conduct their own learning. And this is what the learning and innovation cycle consists of. It's essentially 3 stages, which are depicted there in the 3 boxes. And we're conducting 3 of these cycles over the course of the project period. So we're doing this 3 times, essentially. So I'll just talk through the 3 different stages. The first one is where we start out by conducting learning activities, and that's to gather data about resilience-based approaches. So how are they evolving, what decisions are being made, the organisational sort of side of it, about resilience promotion, the extent to which they are and the ways in which they are promoting resilience amongst children, and well-being amongst children, all recognisable in local ways because we've now established what those are. And then secondly, we move into identifying emerging learning through an analytic process in which we essentially identify themes in our data, and then distill key insights from those. So things that are interesting, surprising, or just indeed relevant to the questions that we're asking about resilience-based approaches and promotion. And Sian's going to share some of these in a moment. And then the third stage of the cycle is where we make sense and innovate. And we do this by reflecting on our current approaches in light of what we've now learned, the new learning that's coming out, and then developing small innovations to try out, which can evolve and support our resilience-based approaches. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this stage in particular. So in the sense-making part of the cycle, we essentially work towards moving from the emerging learning that we've done in stage 2 into some simple concepts or innovations that can be tried out in the next cycle. And we do this in a few different ways. We firstly reflect on the learning. We then use that to reflect on what we're doing in our approaches. So the Resilience Champions did a lot of work to think about what does the learning tell them now about what they're doing and what is working, what probably or might not be working, What does the learning say? What does the learning confirm about what they're doing or contradict about what they're doing, as well as what gaps it might throw up that they might need to address moving forward. We then went into a kind of ideation sort of phase where we identified challenges that the learning presents us with, and we came up with a number of how might we statements. In other words, how might we do such and such to address those challenges? And from those questions, we developed design briefs, and very simple design briefs. And then we used those briefs to generate some simple ideas about how we might respond to those. And then move from there into concept development to refine those ideas and create action plans for them, which are now being taken forward into the next learning cycle, learning and innovation cycle. And because in order to do this sense making, we have conducted learning activities, Sian is now going to share some of the emerging learning that has come out of our first learning cycle that have been used to inform these innovations we're now moving forward. So I'll pass over to you, Sian, so you can share some of that emerging learning.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much for that very comprehensive rundown of the approach that we're taking. Okay, I think I might have control of the screen now, but we don't really know yet. I've missed my chance to click on the thing that said, oh, there we go. Okay, something's happening. So as Ruth said, we have completed the first cycle of our 3 cycles, which were forming the basis of this project. And where we're at now is having identified some emerging insights from the project so far. And what I want to do is share just 3 of those with you. And then these 3 are 3 which are linked directly to the adaptations that the resilience champions are making to their approach in this current second learning cycle. So the first one was this one about a positive environment. And when we're talking about a positive environment, we're talking about an environment in which a child receives positive feedback, an environment where a child feels safe and protected, and also an environment where a child feels that they have access to the information that they need about their rights, about services available to them, and also about legal processes where appropriate in relation to their experiences of exploitation and abuse in particular. Now, this was a finding, a learning which came very much out of all 3 of these the resilience champion sites. There were some that were stronger in some sites than others, but this was one which certainly cut across all 3. So the next one was, and again, this was quite in particular in relation to the Ecuador and Uganda projects, this idea that children with street connections, they can appear to be coping with difficult situations when actually they might not be. A lot of, so we had a workshop in Uganda in March, which we delivered to around 25 different organisations who work with street connected children. And a lot of them said that a child, especially children who live on the street or spend a lot of time on the street, develop or have to develop a confidence and a boldness which could easily mask difficult situations or kind of internal struggles, if you like, and that they can appear stronger than in fact they are. And this is again something that came out strongly from Martha's work in Ecuador, was that children can be accustomed to dealing with abuse and violence, and it's often easy to mistake this confident behaviour as indicating that they're strong enough to cope with these challenges when actually they're quite stressed and overcome with negative emotions. I'll just share with you this example from a 10-year-old, about a 10-year-old boy in Guayaquil in Ecuador. And Martha says, and the names have been changed in this, Martha says, Roberto seemed very independent and clever. He said he didn't need help because he could cope with anything, but he kept asking Hakone to visit him. We began to see that he could not tolerate any joke or any criticism or any disappointment, and all these things made him very angry. So this is that that need to look a bit further beyond that for the kind of the superficial presentation or performance of confidence and strength that children in street situations have kind of inevitably had to develop as an adaptation in order to survive or to cope with their circumstances. The third one is around parents and families, and this was a really key piece of cross-site learning from Ecuador to Uganda. So Hakoni in Ecuador do a lot of work with families and with parents and children and families as a unit in order to strengthen relationships and build resilience of the whole family as being an approach to kind of creating a positive family environment. So one of the insights which has emerged so far is that working with a whole family to build strong attachments with each other, it makes it more likely children will open up to and be supported by their parents. And it seems to increase the resilience of the whole family rather than just the single child. And this is something that Alfred will expand on a little bit in his presentation next. Finally, I just want to give you this snapshot which links these three emerging insights with the adaptations which are taking place in this second learning cycle. So you can see that this issue of children only appearing to be coping has been picked up by Hakoni, who are working with their staff teams to build their capacity to recognise trauma in children and other family members, even where it may not be presented in obvious ways. In Uganda, that was Ellie fiddling with the presentation there, hands off. In Uganda, SELV are strengthening staff capacity to build better parent-child relationships, and Martha from Hakoni has supported Alfred with developing that idea and approach. And then finally at CWISH in Nepal, we have some work to strengthen the staff capacity to use positive feedback approaches with children in order to contribute to that positive environment. So to focus on positives and strengths-based approaches to the staff support and the way that staff are delivering both one-to-one and group support there. Okay, so Learning Cycle 2, as I said, is underway, and the learning update should be published this week or next week, which is essentially a document from which this presentation is drawn. So that will be something which you can use and share with your organisations and networks, and we'll make sure that you all get a copy of that, and it will of course be on the website. The address is just there. Now I am going to hand over to Alfred, who's going to give us probably the much more interesting and colourful presentation compared to all of my text and blue slides, and I will hand over to him now, if I can unmute him and give him permission. His camera has disappeared, but hopefully he will appear. Hi, Alfred. Hi, Alfred, we can hear you now. Can we? Maybe we can't. Yeah. Let's just give him a moment to reconnect, because I think it's his...
Hi, everyone.
You're here.
All right. A resilient champion for SELV International. 7 years working experience.
Oh, we're losing you. Okay, Alfred, we have you. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we have a number of street-connected children living on the streets of Jinja, and these students face a number of challenging situations. One being sexual abuse, the other being sickness and abuse. So in the picture, you're seeing children that we are working with. There are really so many, and most of them are living full-time on the street, and I work directly with the children who are full-time on the streets. These children, normally, when I'm speaking to them, there is a term that I use, and that term is called obuvumu. So obuvumu is a term that is, closely related to resilience, and it has a traits or characteristics of somebody who is capable of overcoming hard situations on the street. It has something related to feelings that children have. So normally they have a saying or a feeling that bad situations are temporal and they are not permanent. And they look at role models who have ever passed through street life. It makes them think that they can make it. They have a saying, this is a local term, as you can see on the screen. The word is Togwamu Subi, Emera Mb, Sialuverera. So this word is, it means don't lose hope, no bad condition is permanent. So next is we have a video of Sam. Sam is a street outreach manager. He's going to tell us what are some of the challenges and perhaps opportunities that we face when we are working with street connected children.
Sorry, everyone. We had the sound working on the videos earlier, so I've just asked Ellie to just check her her settings so that we can make sure that everyone can hear.
Another challenge in building resilience in children on the street is that some of the children that we work with have really, really big problems. It's like starting on a tree that is drying up and you want it to resurrect and start bearing fruits. You really need to water it a lot, give it a lot of nutrients. And then for this child, you'll need to have time for this child. Use all the energy that you have so that you make this child come up again. And when you do that, you'll succeed. It will be just now the matter of keeping on checking whether this person is progressing, or if there is a small setback, you go back and talk to the child again and water again.
Yeah, so some was trying to tell us that they moved to the streets because they perceive it to be the best place where they can achieve some of the basic needs of life. It's not a linear progression because they can relapse and go back to the streets. So in building resilience in the street connected children, we need time and patience, and this is something that Sam talked about. An opportunity is that it's a place of connection with the non-formal actors and peers to be resilient, and also a challenging place of abuse. Next. Yeah, so we've been working with these children and we've seen them developing self-control. So self-control is something that we've seen them developing. Through this, we have a story of a boy I was talking to, and this boy says that because of the work that we do, he has been able to develop self-control. If he wanted to, because something happened, he was hungry and he wanted to start the friend, but then what happened is that he had to stop doing that. Seeing this in many children that we are working with, so children are feeling more experiences of self-control. They are controlling their emotions. So self-control is something that has really come up, and they are sharing this with us. So hunger is one of the major problems that these children face when they are on the street. So how do they cope up with the hunger? So you can see the first picture having go to hotels for makombo. So makombo is a word that means food that is wasted. So this children in a positive way. It's not wasted food. It's not trash. So they say that this food should be eaten, and they eat this food. They go to the hotels and they beg for food, and they are given. And so the non-formal actors, these are the people in the hotels. So they have that connection with the children, and they are able to give them the home. So another thing, the second picture you're seeing is a child taking aviation fuel. This is aeroplane fuel. So they take this because they want to relieve hunger. You know, they tell us when they take aviation fuel, they feel warm at night. They don't feel hungry. They even forget some of the problems that they face while on the streets. So this is also a coping strategy, though it's not a positive coping strategy. But you know, once a child decides to say, "This is my coping strategy," it's really a challenge that we as social workers. Next slide. Yeah, so we are having Brenda, and Brenda is going to tell us something to do with the importance of parent-child relationship.
To me, the challenges in building resilience among the street-connected children is these children don't normally get enough attention from the parents, and this makes them to come back on the streets, thus making them not be resilient. And the opportunities in building resilience among these children is, first, they get the courage and also learn how to make decisions on their own. Let's say they learn how to differentiate what is good and also what is bad. Children are more resilient on the streets compared at home. Why? On the streets, they always get people they talk to and also help them in making decisions, because these people do it wholeheartedly compared now at home, because parents have less time for these children and don't normally always listen to them.
Alfred? Alfred, go ahead.
All right. So in the video, Brenda was telling us that we are working with families to establish a parent-child relationship. As Brenda says, that children are resilient on the street, may not be resilient to crisis within the family. One of the reasons for running to the street is lack of support and being listened to by their parents. Because there is poor relationship between parents and children, so this is both a driver to the street and this is a big setback to reintegration. We have learned from Maka, the resident champion from Yukoni, who has much expertise in working with the parents of street-connected children. So parent-child relationship is something that we are pushing forward to this next learning cycle, because if the relationship is not really established very well at home, you find that the child runs back to the street, and the street becomes a place for this child to build connection and enable him to become resilient. So something we are learning is that we need to make sure that we've established a very good relationship between parents and children at home, so that the children can become resilient at home. They can go to their parents to seek for support when they need. Next. Yeah, so increased support seeking behavior by street-connected children is really increasing. We are recognizing that street-connected children's support seeking behavior is growing. For example, we had a boy called Ali. He's 19 years old. So he came to South to get support after receiving an injury to his hand, in which some of his fingers were cut off in punishment for stealing. Then we also had the Timothy. So Timothy told us that I have saved 50,000 Ugandan shillings with this man I know in the community. So this really shows that these children have connection on the streets, and these people are able to help them. So just like Shan was saying, we are working with them not to make sure that they run away from the street, but sometimes the street is the place for them to establish or build connection. And through Timothy, you can see that this is an example of a non-informal actor who was elected Timothy to become resilient. We also had Mark. Mark is 16 years. He says, we share the little we have with our friends who come for what to eat. Yeah, so I have been using this activity, I can, I am, and I have. So this activity is really very, 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 very important, and it is aimed at establishing a place. For instance, if I say I can have the agency and the capacity to overcome the challenges. If a child says I have people who help me when I'm sick, in danger of need to learn, each day give me food. For instance, I can talk to others about things that frighten me or bother me, e.g. community members. So in this circle game, one child comes up and stands in the middle, in the circle, and he gives a scenario of a challenging situation that he was going through, and he poses a question to the people in the circle. So now the people in the circle can give him the advice that you can do this. You have the resources. You can go to this person in the community to help you. You can do this. So each child comes up with a scenario, then he's in the circle, then poses a question, then we react. Then the children in the circle, they begin responding. So this has led the children to know that though they are on the street, they still have people around them who can help them become resilient and overcome the challenging situations. Yeah, so forming friendship is something that I've seen really, really important and is working right now where I'm working. Children are forming friendship. Now, this friendship are really very, very helpful because sometimes they are being bullied on the streets, so they use their friends to protect themselves against danger. Also sharing of food, yeah. So peer-to-peer support. We are going to hear a video from Alia.
Manyalanze kakanye ali nene akumukanga anzi chanamati kusite kuno katuba yatuyita mizo mingi nnyo kubanga kugeza kusite kuno twayinza kubaako nga toli muvumu nanga nze kyangamba nti buli muntu ali ku street kuno muvumu bansonga nti oyinza okuba nga webase ekiro abaali ne bajja nga baagala kujjako sente zo okujjako sente zo omuntu ayinza okuba akuyamba mu mbeera nakuba mukwano gwo kubanga kati bwe banakulaba nti otambula n'emikwano gyo temuliwo bangi bajja kutyamu nabo okukola ki okujjako sente posi ekyane ku kitongole gye tubeera ku projekiti salve nabo newo banga oli kukuwa nga tolina musuubi yadde bakuyamba okuzzamu essuubi abakusomesa bakuwulira ku mbeera ez'abantu n'ebintu ebirala.
Yeah, so we are encouraging them to form friendship. As I said, that having friends on the street is an important part of protecting yourself from dangers you face. However, the challenge is that peers can also be the perpetrators of violence, sexual, and the exploitation. This is something that is quite common among the street-connected children we work with in Jinja. Sometimes they abuse themselves sexually and different kind of abuse. Though it is very, very important to have peer-to-peer friendship. Next. So building resilience through sports. We have found that friendship formed on the football field can be taken to the street. Through group activities such as sports, art, drama, and athletics, children make positive connections with each other. They learn to collaborate, they learn to support each other, they learn to communicate better, they learn to manage their emotions, for example, anger, and make friends on the streets. So friendship formed through football is really very, very important because they take these friends to the street, and these friends on the street are able to help them when they are facing danger or a difficult situation while living on the street. Yeah, so building trust between staff and children is also something that's very, very important. So children are, through group activities, children help children access staff support. Like, you can see that boy is with the staff doing a street walk. So there is that staff support in a way that if a child is having a difficult situation on the street, is able to go to a staff, and this staff is able to help this child. So knowledge of who to get help and report abuse is also very, very important. When children are in touch with self, they are more likely to seek help, more likely to report abuse, and also a finding that is something that we found that is working in Nepal. So my colleague Prisnya in Nepal is working on building relationship between staff and the children, so that the children can become more resilient while they are on the street. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Alfred. Fantastic presentation, and a really good way, I think you'll all agree, to get a bit of a picture of the experiences for organisations who are working with street connected children, and particularly in the context of street living children in Uganda. So thank you for that. So that comes to the end of our presentation, and it's now time to open up for some discussion. We have some questions which we would really like you to offer answers to. But first, I'd just like to ask Ellie to stop sharing her screen for a second, and then I can see you all. And I'd like to open it up for any comments and questions from any of you. Please do just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. And you can ask a question, whether that's about the project, about the approach, or about the learning so far that's come out of it. If not, then we can go on to our questions. I'm looking for any hands that are coming up on the little sidebar for those people that haven't got their cameras on. Okay, so I can see one. That's Nat at Warchild. Hi, Nat.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay. So really interesting presentation. Thank you, everyone. We're starting to think, or I'm starting to think here, about how resilience affects, or how children affected by conflict are resilient or are not resilient, and how the different programs that Warchild has increases children's resilience. From thinking about children's rights, how do you, this is more a conceptual question, how are you conceptualizing resilience as a rights-based approach to working with children, or do you think of it more solely as helping to improve children's well-being? And that's probably to Sean, Alfred and Ruth, I would think.
Okay, I'm just going to mute you again, Nat, no offence. Okay, I'm happy to just pick that up in the first instance. So last week, Alfred and I were at the Pathways to Resilience conference in Cape Town, which is organised by the Resilience Research Centre. And Sarah Thomas de Benitez did a kind of a keynote session as part of a panel debate where she really drilled down into this a little bit, and she gave a fantastic case study of a young man called Pedro that she worked with at Joconi in Mexico many years ago. He was a young boy who was separated from his brothers, from his family. They were all put into different homes, residential homes. He felt that he didn't have, the environment in a lot of the residential homes was inappropriate for him. He kept, misbehaving, which basically meant running away in order to find his family, because he identified that actually the most important thing to him was reconnecting with his family. And she talked a lot about this, the child's right to about resilience within the context of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also in the context of the UN General Comment, which is due for publication any day now, which is on children in street situations, and that the need to think about the need to take a rights-based approach when we're thinking about resilience, because resilience factors overlap with rights. And she gave a really good example about how at one point Pedro was actually in a juvenile detention centre and was given some child rights training in this juvenile detention centre and received a certificate for this training, whilst being very aware of the irony of the fact that he was in detention at that point and unable to actually fulfill his rights. She also talked about this understanding of a street-connected child, which links back to what I said in my presentation, of a street-connected child's resilience factors not necessarily correlating with the kind of the particular understandings of what a child should behave like, or the expectations of what a street-connected child should want or need in a given situation. And I think this relates really closely back to the general comment on street situations and the importance of the child having a right to be on the street. And this idea of the interpretation of Article 15 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the right to freedom of association, as being interpreted as the right to public space for children, because adults have right to public space. Why is it that we say that children don't have the right to public space, or that some people perceive that they do not? So I think that it's very hard to see the street as a source of resilience unless we accept that children have a right to be there. If that helps, Nat. Sorry, it was a little bit garbled. It's very hot in this office. I'm just going to point the fan at my face. Does that answer your question, Nat? And does anyone else have anything to contribute? Okay, I'm just going to go on to Jane now, who has something to say.
Okay.
Hi, Jane.
Yeah, hi. And can I just also make a quick comment on that last question as well? It seems to me that when we think about resilience and think about some of the things that have been called sort of, building blocks that contribute to resilience in children, a lot of those actually relate to children's rights, a right to an education, a right to a family life, a right to be listened to, rights to participation. A lot of those are factors which have been linked directly with the presence or otherwise of resilience in children as well. And I think that does say a lot in terms of the responses to children who are in conflict situation or other humanitarian crises as well. What are the things that they need either to promote and strengthen resilience or to recognise resilience and actually ask them what they need at that stage. So I think there is a real link that's actually not often articulated. I think it's a really good question that you asked. The other question I had was around this this idea of resilience being something that exists over time, and that a lot of children can do well in a short space of time, but actually that isn't maintained, or children sort of lose their capacity for positive responses, etc. So I just wonder, within these sort of learning projects, how that sense of these innovative interventions, these new initiatives that are being taken, how those can actually be looked at in relation to children's outcomes over time as well. And maybe also just sort of going back to that question, linked to some of the presence of some of these building blocks, or children's own interpretations of whether those building blocks, sense of agency, having knowledge, being able to navigate towards services, how they change over time as well. So it would just be interesting to hear a little bit more about your plans for how that's going to be tracked.
Ruth, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think I've still got the mic. Okay.
No.
Sorry, I'm not being very good at keeping up with the muting and unmuting. Carry on, Ruth.
Hi. Yeah. Well, I think it's a really interesting area, Jane. And I think it's probably quite challenging to capture over the length of the project that we've got at the moment. But that's not to say we're not looking at it. But I think you know, it would, I think in my mind, it would require a much longer period of time to sort of track individual children and actually kind of look at those individual journeys, if you like. Whereas the sort of the kind of learning questions we have set ourselves are much more around understanding the kind of organisational, the changes in the organisations and the approach, and then the kind of impact that's having on promoting resilience with children, and then the ways in which that's building or moving towards well-being, or helping sort of promote well-being. So I don't think it's sort of as a very key focus, if you like, if I've understood your question right, but that isn't to say that's something that would be really interesting to do. I really like that idea. I think we would need to sort of focus a lot more on looking at individuals' children's stories and on individual journeys, which is something that perhaps we could think about doing in the next learning cycle, and start to sort of look at children that we have done activities with, or done learning activities with, and involved in the research so far, and sort of coming back to them. That might be something we could consider, Sean. I'm just sort of thinking on you know, I'm thinking kind of on my feet at the moment, because each learning cycle, whilst we have a kind of stock kind of group of methods and tools that we're using to do the learning, we are adapting those for each learning cycle in order to kind of drill down into things that have come up that are interesting, emerging learning that's coming out that we want to explore further, because this is all sort of kind of quite raw. And so we've got quite a bit of scope, I think, to sort of maybe rescope and reshape a bit moving forward. So I think that'd be a really interesting comment to take and think about a bit more deeply.
Just going to see if Martha, do you have anything to add on that around the kind of the longer term outcomes and tracking for children in relation to the resilience-based approaches?
Yes. In our case, for example, in Ecuador, in Juconi, it takes us like 3 or 4 years working with one child and one family. Sometimes more time, sometimes 5, 6, 7 years. It depends on the level of psychological damage that each children or family they have. So, and we can do many activities for a short time, but it doesn't mean that it is going to help them. They need the most important beginning with them is to create and to build a positive relationship with them. So this is the basis for the next work that we do with them. So if we don't this basis of trust, it's more difficult to work with them, and because they have a lot of needs. So we can focus in the all needs that they have, but in the most important, that it is the positive relationship that they can do with us. So in that context, this is the most important that we can provide to one child and to their families too. Because after any program ends, what happened with these children? So for us, for that reason, it's very important to work with the family too.
Thanks, Martha. Alfred, have you got anything to add on that from the point of view of SALV as an organisation that doesn't work as intensively with families as Hakomi and Martha do, and who perhaps work with children who are still living on the street, whereas I know that most of the children that Hakomi work with are work on the street but do kind of have family homes to which they return. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how it's different for SALV working with children who are living on the street.
Yeah, something that we've really seen is that children on the street, they don't know their rights, and sometimes they are abused. And what we are doing right now is to speak to them, let them know about their rights. And something that we've really seen as an impact is that they are able now to come up There are some organizations that are particularly working with the children exposed to sexual abuse, and these children are now able to come to us, and we've been referring them there. So children's rights, when they're on the street, they don't know their rights. So we are working with them to break that silence so that they're able to come to us. But first, it begins by establishing the relationship here.
Great. So that's kind of connecting those two questions then in terms of how a rights-based approach to resilience can actually, and a rights-based approach and an approach which also supports children to understand their rights could have an impact over time. I'm just going to unmute Ruth. Yes, Ruth?
No, it wasn't to cut you off. I was just thinking more about Jane's question and what Martha and Alfred just said, and thinking, actually a lot of this, it strikes me that a lot of this is about understanding the triggers into and out of resilience, as well as sort of this long-term perspective, right? So, as James rightly said, you can be resilient for a short period of time, and actually having an idea of that, the sustainability of resilience is very important. But also if we can understand more about those tipping points, that sort of gives us a basis from which to sort of see what those journeys might look like. And I think we are uncovering, learning about that side of it, which would be useful to look at further for us, I think.
Great, thanks, Ruth. I'm just going to come to Renata now because she's been raising her hand. Hi, Renata.
Hi, how are you? So, are you listening to me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you want to just introduce yourself? Sorry, I know, and we didn't get an introduction from Jane. I apologise for that. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly, Renata, before you ask?
Okay, I'm from Brazil, and I have a long-term research with commercial sexual exploitation of children and resilience as well. So I would like to talk just a little bit about this question related to in and out to resilience, something like that. I'm sorry, I'm from the, I try to speak the best I can, but I'm sorry, English not my first language. So I did two important research for me involving sexually abused children and sexual exploitation. And I made a research with them 17 years ago, and I'm meeting them again, and I'm producing a documentary about their lives. And so I could, see during a period of 17 years what happened with these women. I worked with 8 girls, they aged between 12 to 14, and now they're 32 years old. And it was very clear for me that the girls that were able to overcome the situation of sexual exploitation, they had very strong connection with their communities. They were able to establish good relationship with mentors, and also they were able to act as protective factors for other people's lives. And there's another thing that was very important to me is the idea of protagonism or agency. So I believe that to be involved in the fights against children's violation of rights or engaged in actions to prevent sexual abuse, so to become an activist of the cause, it's important, to recognize the condition they live, and since we can provide them with contacts, with relationship that, increase their strength in order to recognize themselves as actors in this fight, is something that's important to them. So that's something I realized. And I also worked with 4 adolescents involved in child labor here in Brazil 7 years ago, and I made a research with Michael Langer, and the research was negotiation resilience, and we used a visual method approach, like photographs and videotaping their lives in a methodology we call a day in a life, developed by Anne Cameron. So it can be useful as a strategy of research or intervention that, involve the children in take action, in making pictures or filming situation in their lives, in their context, that can be helpful. And with this discussion of long-term outcomes or in and out to resilience, of course, well, I understand that people are not resilient, or I don't like to use as an adjective, but I believe that the condition of resilience, the process of the resilience, it really varies according to what the context offers to them. So resilience process, not something individual, but something that's related to the social context, what we offer to them. So that's how we help people to develop resilience. Since we offer intervention, context, support, friendship or family support, that's important to realize that people do not develop resilience alone. They need people, they need connection, they need relationships. That's what well, if I can help you, I can send you a paper I wrote with Michael Unger about protagonism and resilience in regard child work, children, but it can be helpful. If you want, I can share it with you. Thank you,
Renata. That would be really helpful. It'll be a great thing to be able to share on our learning platform. I'm sure that everyone would really enjoy.
I can send you, sure.
So thank you for your contribution. Okay, does anybody else have anything to add? If not, I've got a few questions that I want to throw out to you, unless anyone has a question right now. Oh, Jane, yes, you have something to add? Jane, could you introduce yourself and just explain who you are and why you're here for those that don't know?
Okay, I'm Jane Warburton, and I previously worked within Oak Foundation as the coordinator of the first phase of the Bamboo project, so which extended, it feels indefinitely, but it went on for about 5 years, and then began that sort of framing of what the next phase of Bamboo, as it moves from the research into this practice phase, would look like. So that's what I did in that former life. I now work as a freelance consultant and in various aspects with different organisations on issues connected with children, child protection, children's rights, etc. So that's who I am. Just a sort of very quick comeback, and I really, really appreciated what you were saying, Renata, and it would be great, I think, to see your paper and get access to that from the website. But and taking absolutely what Martha was saying about how this process of working and producing children reconnected with families, children staying in families, strong and sustainable families and relationships may take years and years. Having worked as a frontline social worker for many years, I know that. But I do think it's also possible to look at some of the steps in that process, things that children themselves may identify. And I think, Renata, your examples of some of the things that were positive for children, and thinking about how in these projects you might, or these sort of organisations might explore some of those interim changes that children themselves are experiencing and are positive for them, might be really helpful in terms of actually seeing, yes, is this on the right track? Are we moving in the right direction? So it's much more about the trajectory than the end results. But I think it could be possible to come up with some questions, yeah, and I think it also just sort of I'm just thinking out loud really, but you know, the idea of actually consulting with children directly about, we're doing this work, we're changing some of the ways that we're working, some of our approaches, how does that feel for you, is incredibly respectful and already participatory, and allows children sort of some control over, you know, the services that they're receiving as well in a very demonstrable way. So I think it might be useful. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane, for that. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add, or any questions for anyone, or talking points? If not, then I'm going to throw a couple of questions out there. Okay, here we go. So what would be useful is for those who are working in different settings, what do you think a better understanding of local conceptions of resilience in the places where you work, how do you think that might help and inform your work with street connected children? So it's about that understanding of the way that resilience is understood, or something like resilience, in different cultural settings, contexts, and also with different in different circumstances. It'd be really interesting to get some thoughts on that in terms of those local understandings. Does anyone have anything they want to add?
Okay, so in regard to this aspect, Sean, I think it can be helpful. I don't know if everybody knows the work of Barbara Rogoff from United States. She is known by the approach of cultural psychology. So it can be helpful because I think she helps us to understand like the cultural practices that inform, resilience. Because I believe that in many countries we have like different understanding of what resilience means, what it means to do well or to cope well. It can really be different. And also in regard to strategies that children can use or select to show that they are empowered. For example, and so in regard to theoretical aspects, I don't know if everybody is familiar with the concept of hidden resilience, developed by Michael Langer as well. And I think he has a book published in 2004. I think it's Hidden Resilience. So maybe it can be helpful too, because usually people understand that resilience is related with social behavior, or behaviors that are, expected to be positive, for example. But sometimes people, children who has no other social supports or other opportunities, develop some antisocial behaviors that can be seen as resilient too. So I think that's what I could add, like to think about Barbara Rogoff's perspective, like cultural psychology, and also this concept of hidden resilience, maybe can be helpful to understand like local perceptions and local strategy children choose to cope with different adversities. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. Fred, I'm going to just unmute you. If you could just introduce yourself before you add your point. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Fred. And I'm working for Goal as the protection advisor. So what we've been doing is that we're working with street connected children in different settings. And one of the settings is in Ethiopia. I've been running a participative action research for the last 4 years there. And this year, in 2016, end of 2016, we've been analyzing the data of all the children that we've been in contact with, which is just shy of 10,000 children, and also run a much more qualitative, I would say, investigation and survey with about 300 children, combining focus group discussion and longer conversation and so on. So on the resilience, what we really identify is that there are very different profiles of children reaching the streets, both for the reason why they reach the street and also and that will translate in their experience and in the groups they will join or not join, and the resilience tutor they will look with or not. Some of the things that we were quite surprised finding is that we found out, for example, that they're over 70, nearly 80% of them that are still maintaining regular contact with their parents. And that would change, it would change according to the reason why they left their families in the first place. A majority of boys would have left in order to seek better opportunities. So the process of getting into the street is completely different than, for example, a majority of girls would leave later in terms of age than boys. They would leave generally because of family conflicts, abuse, or another. So you do have a lot of different profiles, and it's quite complex to say there's one model of resilience in the street in Awasa or in Addis. There are multiple models of resilience, and children between themselves are really supporting each other, and they're kind of complementing each other. What we've seen is that the way that we've been responding, and I was finished there, the way that we've been responding in, for example, in saying we only will work with street connected children, which would go from 6 to 18 years old, is not adequate, because children are growing, their roles are changing as well, and the youth of 18 to 25 will have a different position and different role, and it has especially big impact on street connected girls who will engage sooner in partnerships or love relation and relationships with boys that will be older, so they will seek less support from social workers or outreach workers. They will avoid as well formal protection agencies, because they think that the formal protection agencies want to take them out and bring them back whilst they are more running away from a conflict, from a situation. So for us, it was quite essential to really take the time and to look at both with quantitative data and qualitative data to the complexity of the profiles. And from there, we to identify as well as possible the different resilience tutor or mechanisms that are existing for those different profiles. And that's where we are now. So in terms of resilience, it just increased the complexity of work, but I think that it's quite interesting in there.
Thanks, Fred. Really, really interesting insight there. I'm just going to hand over to Ruth.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to, I was really interesting hearing that, Fred. And I also just wanted to pick up on the comments that were made before that about, sort of, well, and by Fred as well, but sort of recognising different multiple kind of models of resilience, if you like, and this idea that resilience might be in forms that we don't necessarily identify or fit within our kind of moral and social ideals of what childhood should be like, particularly when we're talking about street connected children, other kinds of children that are, going against the grain of kind of this sort of ideal version of childhood that exists, and what Renata was saying as well. And I thought it was really interesting that Renata brought up the idea of agency. And I just wanted to, I think, just to point out this, just to pick up on this idea and mention some work that's been done on ambiguous agency. It's an edited volume in Children's Geography's Journal that I was involved in. And that basically, we kind of coined the term in that, ambiguous agency, which was to try and refer to childhoods and agency that is enacted by people that goes against the grain of these moral and social ideals of childhood. And that is obviously something that's present when we're thinking about resilience as well, and the different kinds of resilience that children might display that might not be overtly recognisable to us, and our sort of ideas of what resilience might be. And that's why I think the local understanding side of it is, for me, is so important. To kind of garner and get information about. Yeah, so just really to kind of comment, really.
Thanks, Ruth. Does anybody else have anything to add on that? I'm looking at Sander. Sorry, I'm unmuting you. Warning, I'm unmuting you. Just wondering if you have anything to bring in from your perspective at mobile schools, and your kind of experience of taking education into the street space and what you're seeing in terms of resilience.
Yeah, it's what we see with most of our partner organizations. So my name is Sander, and I'm working as the coordinator for the partnerships Africa and Asia for a streetwise mobile school. And what we do is, in fact, we bring a blackboard on wheels to the streets, to local organizations that do outreach work with street connected children. So our main aim is as well to really work on that self-esteem. Like we really believe with mobile school that all of these children, if you're able to survive on the streets, then you definitely have a lot of talents, have a lot of skills, and you have a lot of resilience as well. You have a lot of potential as well. And by bringing those mobile schools to the streets, we want to build that resilience by giving them like the positive feedback that was mentioned as well. That will be more investigated in the Nepal project. That's something where we really work on, because we really believe by bringing those educational games together with a mobile school, we have like more than 300 educational games that work on literacy and mathematics, but also business on the streets, storytelling, identity, all those kind of things, all those kind of topics that we can use on the streets to allow children to discover talents. Because on mobile school, for example, we see a lot of children as well who just arrived on the streets, but also older guys that are already for more than 8, 9, 10 years on the streets. And probably they will never leave the streets as well. But if you look at their coping mechanisms, the way they survive on the streets, they are really examples of guys who have a lot of resilience as well, and by approaching them in a positive way and not focusing on their problems or on past traumas that they went through, the negative experience of the street, we try to let them gain the belief in themselves again and the self-confidence. And I think, with most partners we work, we really see a lot of inspiring examples of those guys as well. Young children, older children, children that are involved in commercial sex work, and all those examples. So that's a little bit what we do with Mobile School, and how we try to build resilience as well. For example, with our company Streetwise, we really have some workshops as well where we use stories of the streets of children who are very resilient that we bring, for example, to companies in Belgium, because everybody can learn something from these guys who are surviving in like a extreme context of crisis. For example, we work on a couple of dump sites with partners in Kenya. If you're able to survive over there, if they would ask me to survive over there, probably I would be dead in 2 days. But those guys, they manage. So they're like real examples as well. And if we really focus on those positive things, we see that those guys are empowered as well. And they might not leave the streets in the end. Of course, some of them will do, but other ones, they will just feel stronger, have that self-concept as well. And we were talking about gaining that trust relationship. By bringing those tools to the streets, we show them as well that they're trustworthy adults, which they can rely on. They can share their story, and we try to bring a community together as well so that they can build those relationships. And it was interesting to hear about those non-formal actors as well, because we really believe as well, if we can bring that community closer together, that they will act more resilient on the streets as well. They will have connections. So that's a little bit in short from our perspective of working with our local partners, how we try to encourage resilience and that positive feedback and stuff.
Thank you. Thanks, Sander, for that. Thanks, everyone. I'm aware that we're just up to the end of time now. So I wanted to give the opportunity to say thanks to everyone for attending. I want to make sure we finish on time because I have a feeling that Zoom will just kick us all out at exactly 3:30. So I wanted time to just round off. Hi, there's Caroline. Give a wave, Caroline. I know. So that's Caroline Ford. She's the CEO of Consortium for Street Children, revealing herself. And we just want to quickly tell you about what's next. So please do, if you're not already, sign up to buildingwithbamboo.org. It's free and really easy to sign up to. And that's where the Resilience Champions, Martha, Alfred, and Krishna, are sharing their kind of personal experiences as well as case studies and stories from the children they're working with and their experiences over the project. Also, that's where the learning coming out of Learning Cycle 1 will be officially shared. So that's the learning update, but we'll make sure that you will receive notice of that. I also just want to give a quick plug that on the 9th of November, CSC's annual research conference here in London will be on the theme of resilience. And there will be opportunity to dial in remotely to hear the keynote speeches and panels for that. So do make a mark in your diary for the 9th of November, wherever you are in the world. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Alfred for a fantastic presentation. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words, Alfred. I'll unmute you.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for participating in the webinar. It was really very, very nice. It was also very good hearing different views from different people who already have knowledge on resilience. Thank you so much, Ranata. Thank you so much, Sanda, Dejilin, and everybody. Yeah, it's really been amazing and good to learn many things. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alfred, and thanks everyone. A huge thanks to Mildred and Ellie for all the coordination and logistical and technical side of everything. So thanks everyone, and yeah, look forward to communicating with all of you, keeping these conversations going on the online platform. Remember, there is a forum there. We're going to be posting some other questions that we have prepared and haven't had time to cover on that forum, so it would be really fantastic if you could kind of come on and keep these conversations going, and anyone who hasn't had a chance to contribute, please do so there. And I look forward to seeing you all again at the next shared learning panel. Thanks everyone.